There are legends that frighten us because they describe monsters. And then there are legends that frighten us because they suggest the monster might look exactly like us. For generations, stories have circulated throughout the American Southwest about something that is not quite human, something capable of deception, something associated with darkness, animals, and transformation. A being that, according to traditional Navajo beliefs, represents something far more serious than the internet's modern idea of a cryptid. It is known today by a name that has become almost synonymous with the paranormal, the Skinwalker. And decades later, thousands of miles from the places where these traditional stories originated, another name will become attached to it: Skinwalker Ranch. But before we talk about the ranch, we need to understand the legend, because the real story is much older and much darker. The word Skinwalker has become a familiar part of modern paranormal culture. You see it in documentaries, you hear it in podcasts, you find it everywhere across the internet. But the term is often presented far too simply: a monster, a shapeshifter, a creature wearing an animal skin. The reality is more complicated. The concept comes from Navajo traditions, and the English term Skinwalker is commonly used to refer to the figure known in Navajo as Yi Nal Delushi. The subject is traditionally considered extremely serious and taboo, and that's important, because the Skinwalker is not simply a campfire monster invented to frighten children. Within traditional Navajo belief, the concept is connected to a harmful witchcraft and the misuse of spiritual power. The distinction matters, because over the years, popular culture has transformed the idea into something considerably different: a Hollywood monster, a cryptid, a supernatural predator. But the original belief is rooted in a much deeper cultural and spiritual context. One of the most disturbing aspects of the Skinwalker legend is transformation. Traditional accounts associate the figure with the ability to assume animal forms. Different animals have become associated with the modern mythology, including coyotes, wolves, foxes, and other creatures. But this is where modern retellings can become misleading. The idea isn't simply human turns into wolf. The deeper concept involves someone deliberately using supernatural power for harmful purposes. And that makes the story much more disturbing, because the terrifying part isn't necessarily the animal, it's the human being behind it. Imagine driving down an empty road late at night. You see someone standing beside it. At first, you assume they're human. Then, the figure moves. Not like a person, not like an animal either. Just wrong. That uncanny feeling is the heart of many modern Skinwalker stories. The fear that what you're looking at may not be what it appears to be. But there's another element that makes these stories particularly disturbing: deception. In modern Skinwalker folklore, stories often involve strange sounds, unusual behavior, and sometimes voices that seem almost human. Imagine hearing someone outside your home, calling your name. You recognize the voice, but something doesn't feel right. You look outside. Nobody is there. Then the voice comes again, from somewhere else. This is the kind of story that survives because it attacks something fundamental: our instinct to trust what we hear. what we see, what we recognize, and what happens when those instincts become unreliable. As the decades passed, stories surrounding the Skinwalker began appearing farther and farther from their original cultural context, and eventually, something changed. The Skinwalker became part of a much larger paranormal mythology. UFOs, ghosts, Bigfoot, strange lights, missing animals, unexplained injuries, and mysterious creatures seen in the darkness. The internet accelerated that transformation. Suddenly, stories from different places could be combined into one enormous mythology. And the Skinwalker became something very different from the original cultural concept, a modern paranormal icon, a shape-shifting creature lurking somewhere beyond the edge of civilization. But there was one place where the name would become permanently attached to something much stranger, a remote property in Utah. The Uinta Basin is enormous, remote, beautiful, and sparsely populated. In the middle of this landscape sits a property that would eventually become famous around the world, Skinwalker Ranch. Long before television crews arrived, long before paranormal investigators became fascinated with the property, stories were already circulating about strange events in the area. Reports involving unusual lights, unexplained phenomena, animals behaving strangely, and something even more unsettling, reports of strange creatures. And this is where the old legend collided with modern paranormal culture, because suddenly, people weren't just talking about the Skinwalker as folklore. They were asking whether something resembling the legend might actually be appearing here. Some of the most disturbing modern stories involve creatures that witnesses say didn't seem quite too right. Too large, too fast, moving strangely, appearing suddenly, and disappearing just as quickly. But this is where we need to slow down, because there is a difference between a story, a witness report, a traditional belief, and independently verified evidence. Those things aren't interchangeable. And despite decades of fascination, there's still no scientifically established evidence proving that a supernatural Skinwalker exists. That doesn't mean every witness is lying. It doesn't mean every strange event has an obvious explanation. It simply means we have to separate what people believe happened from what we can actually demonstrate. And sometimes that uncertainty is even more unsettling. Maybe that's why the Skinwalker story has survived, because it doesn't require us to believe in monsters. It only requires us to wonder, what if something is watching? Humans are incredibly good at recognizing patterns. We see faces in shadows. We hear voices in the wind. We turn ordinary movements into something meaningful. But our brains are also designed to detect danger. And when you're alone in the wilderness, in the middle of the night, with nothing around you but darkness, that ancient survival instinct can become overwhelming. Every sound has a warning. Every shadow becomes a possibility. And every animal call becomes something you can't quite identify. You tell yourself there's nothing there. Then you hear something behind you. So what is the Skinwalker? A supernatural being? A product of ancient belief? A misunderstood cultural tradition? A modern cryptid created by the internet? Or simply a name we give to things we don't understand? There may never be a single answer, but there is something we know for certain. The legend is much older than Skinwalker Ranch, and the ranch didn't create the story. Instead, the ranch gave the modern world a place to attach it, a real location, a real landscape, real people reporting strange experiences. and an enormous unanswered question. The Skinwalker legend existed long before television, long before paranormal YouTube channels, long before internet forums, and long before anyone called a particular piece of Utah desert Skinwalker Ranch. But then, something happened. People began telling stories about strange events occurring on that property. Lights in the sky, animals behaving strangely, unexplained phenomena, and encounters with things that witnesses couldn't easily explain. Maybe there is a rational explanation for every one of them. Maybe there isn't. But that is exactly where the story becomes interesting. Because if the legend is only a legend, then what happened on that ranch? And if something really was happening there, what exactly were people encountering? Because sometimes the scariest question isn't, what is the monster? It's, what if something is actually there? If you want to go beyond the legend and explore the strange events, witnesses, investigations, and unanswered questions surrounding one of the most mysterious locations in America, subscribe to the channel, because we're not stopping here. We're going to the Skinwalker Ranch, and we're going to ask one question: what really happened there? I'll see you in the darkness.